Let's get back to our top story at this point, looking at the ban by the Central Bank of Nigeria on 9 banks from taking any participation, making any form of market operation at the interbank forex market. Femi Awoyemi is the CEO of ProShare Nigeria, and it joins me in the studio to take a look at this situation. Good morning, Femi. Good to have you after a long time.
Good morning.
Good to have you. Now, did this come as a surprise to you?
Yes, it did.
Why was it a surprise?
More of a shock because if you put it within context, we've had a few challenges with the FX market. We just started stabilizing around July, and the subject matter under question is not something that was just suddenly discovered. This was a matter that had started for over a year ago between consultations between CBN and virtually all the banks, and for which there was understanding that these monies will be repaid. It wasn't a sudden discovery, quote unquote. It wasn't also a non-compliance issue with TSA. Okay. I mean, the impression has been created that it is. It is not. CBN decided to take its action to do this, but we felt that there were better ways in which it could have been done, because you are dealing with 3 critical issues here. You are dealing with liquidity subject. You are dealing with system stability issues in terms of the financial system stability, and you're dealing with signaling. What is the panic all about? This is not an unknown transaction. It is a transaction related to energy dividends, related to NNPC money, for which contractual agreements have been reached between the banks to pay off this money over a particular period of time. Now, there wasn't much activity. Don't forget that because of the retreating economy, most of the international borrowers are also retreating from Nigeria, so banks can't even access FX funds. So what we see that's happening within the FMDQ was something to suggest that, oh, there are chances that things will begin to build up and these banks will be in a position. Again, don't also forget that the central player here, the one who puts out the money and not the IOCs, is the CBN. And these monies by the IOCs taken as deposit were also used to either do financing projects related to IOC or mostly trade finance.
So it's not entirely the fault of the banks in this case?
Well, if you have an understanding with your apex regulator as to how to manage a particular deposit obligation, and then you have that understanding, it will be necessary for you to follow it through to a logical conclusion. For example, the CBN could have called the MDs of those banks and informed them that there are certain situations that have changed now. But yet the CBN understands their position. Let me give you an example. Here's my concern. If the CBN announces that I want to conduct stress tests that will determine capital adequacy and also address liquidity concerns, and then you take an action that can precipitate a naira run on those banks and make sure people, if you were a customer now, you go to the bank and say, can I take my money from this bank and go to another bank? What then? You are almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, if that is one action you are planning, and this other action, you may move from a dollar problem to a naira side problem. What is it? Should they pay back the money? I don't think there's any doubt as to how that money has to be paid back. But this money will be paid back into a CBN domiciled bank account with either Standard Chartered or JP Morgan. And the whole essence of it all, which had happened before, was the recognition that the origin of the money being in the banks wasn't a violation of TSA. It was a policy taken by CBN, perhaps under Soludo, you recall, when we said that we needed to bring deposits into Nigerian banks to fund operations in Nigerian operations so that they can have access to do so. And it was also sustained by Sanusi, also sustained by this current administration, which was what led to the understanding CBN rightfully took a very strong leadership position to show understanding, and they've been paying these monies back. This money goes slightly above 6 billion.
So the recent scarcity in forex seems to be one major problem that the banks are facing, because reports actually states that following the presidential directive on TSA, most of the DMBs remitted all naira-denominated funds in their possession, including that of the NNPC and the NLNG to the CBN. However, the dollar component of the NLNG, NNPC funds in the banking system, estimated at about $5 billion, could not be remitted immediately due to forex problems. How do you think this would have been taken care of?
Nobody been taking care of it. That's why the balance came down to 2.3. They've been paying back. The CBN understood that there was no FX. Who is the major determinant or provider of supply of FX? CBN. Who is the supervisory agency in charge of the banks? CBN. Who knows their financial condition better? CBN. So why would you therefore say you suspend or you ban when you know their condition? Let me give you an example. CBN in 2010, not 2010, 2014, October, wrote to Skybank to say that we understand that you have capital adequacy and liquidity concerns. Just about the time they were about to buy Main Street Bank. Today, CBN has taken over this bank and has funded it close to about 200 billion. Now, this same CBN has also put Skybank on the list. But you know their condition. You know the reality in their balances. But some of these other institutions also have obligations and indebtedness with the government for which a set-off could have been applicable. Either way, if you go beyond the specifics of the issue, you are talking about financial signaling here. Because you have the full information available to you, you have the power of moral assuasion. You also understand the timing and the dynamics of what is happening. It is possible for you to meet with the banks and then express that we will need this money to be dialed back and paid. Now, if they go ahead, they have two options. One, they will pay. Definitely the banks will find a way to pay. They can either do a set-off with the CBN, the CBN approves it, or go ahead and fund money where? They either fund money to meet their trade finance obligations, either through parallel market, which will not be advisable, which will put pressure on the parallel market, or they go outside to fund the money, which again creates additional exposure. So
I'm trying to see how I can talk about a number of issues within a very limited time for you, Femi. But let's talk about the issue of liquidity. It seems that banks are starved of liquidity. That's some of the things that we're hearing. Perhaps the government should relax its guidelines on TSA compliance. Would that help in this situation?
See, the functions of the banks reflect the state of your economy. Prior to quarter one, quarter two, the banks were struggling to meet their obligations. Basically, their incomes were falling. The only major source of income has been FX, which is a distortion in itself. Because if the banks are solely determined on making money off FX, there's something wrong with the economy. The banks cannot survive on just trading on FX alone. But the real problem you have is a simple supply side problem. Now, if these banks have these obligations with you, what would you do with the money? To use it to pay obligations as well? Okay, you take the money back from the banks and you put it in the JP Morgan and Standard Chartered. These people are not even lending us money. Don't also forget that some banks even have Eurobond money, which they've taken to either secure both trade finance obligations, mostly trade finance obligations, really. Let's not even talk about those fundings for powers. Some of them are also to meet trade obligations which are falling due, for which customers cannot access FX.
And this situation could be worse based on these restrictions.
I think the unintended consequences will be seen around what the reactions of the market is after these banks meet the obligations, because it doesn't suggest that there's I don't understand what the significance of the value. The story has been said that it seems as if it's TSA non-compliance. It has nothing to do with TSA non-compliance.
And for those who would want to get access Forex through these 9 banks, what is their predicament?
No, they should probably just wait for another 24, 48 hours. This will be resolved.
Hopefully.
It's a storm in a teacup.
Hopefully. Thank you so much, Femi Awuyemi, CEO, ProShare Nigeria. We do appreciate your time with us on the show. This is an ongoing conversation.